Have you ever stayed in a relationship longer than you should have, hoping that love could overcome everything, even humiliation and self-doubt? This story isn't just about a man and a woman, it's about the struggle for dignity, self-love, and the realization that true worth doesn't come from the approval of others. As we age, we face the temptation to prove ourselves, often sacrificing our happiness in the process. But what if I told you that love should never cost you your self-respect? This video takes you through the emotional journey of an elderly man who, despite his best efforts, found himself trapped in a relationship that stripped him of his dignity. He eventually found the courage to walk away, reclaim his identity, and rediscover his values. Why should you keep watching? Because the lessons this man learned are powerful and essential for anyone, especially those who have experienced the pain of growing older. By the end of this video, you'll understand the importance of self-love, how to recognize when a relationship is draining your worth, and why accepting solitude may sometimes be the healthiest choice. Don't miss out. This isn't just a story, it's a life-changing message for anyone looking to reclaim their confidence and embrace their true value at any age. Watch until the end and discover the wisdom that comes with aging and the power of loving yourself first. If you aren't subscribed, I recommend subscribing and activating the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support means a lot to me. If you enjoyed this video, you can help me continue spreading valuable lessons by liking and sharing it. If you like the topic of this video, please comment with a 1. If not, please comment with a 0 to let me know how I can improve and create better content for you. Now, let's begin. In the beginning, everything felt like a dream come true, as if he had stumbled into a second chance at a life he thought had long passed him by. She showered him with compliments that felt like warm sunlight piercing through years of cold self-doubt. Her words were tender and precise, as if she knew exactly what he needed to hear to rekindle the fire within him. She called him strong, capable, and wise. She said his age brought a gravitas and charm that no younger man could ever emulate. Her affection felt so genuine, so consuming, that he began to believe in a version of himself he had long forgotten, a man who was virile, desirable, and worthy of love. Every look she gave him seemed charged with an energy that made his heart race. Her smiles held a playful seduction, her gestures exuded deliberate grace. She had mastered the art of making him feel like he was the only man in the world who mattered. Eager to keep her gaze upon him, he bent over backward to please her. He went out of his way to ensure her happiness, treating her like a queen who had bestowed him with the rare privilege of her attention. Nothing seemed too extravagant, too troublesome, or too much effort. She wasn't just a woman, she was a beacon of youth and vitality, a force that made him feel alive in ways he hadn't in decades. But as the days turned into weeks, tiny cracks began to form in the foundation of their perfect world. At first, they were subtle, almost imperceptible, things you could dismiss as quirks or misunderstandings. She began to make suggestions framed as well-meaning advice. "You really should take better care of yourself," she said one day, her tone light but with an undercurrent of condescension. "A man your age shouldn't be struggling with things like this." He laughed it off at first, brushing it aside as a playful comment, but the remarks didn't stop. They came more often, disguised as concern but landing like tiny darts aimed at his self-esteem. What began as small suggestions slowly grew into persistent criticisms. Her voice carried an edge of superiority, a subtle reminder that she was younger, fitter, and more vibrant than he was. He started to feel the weight of her words, the way they lingered long after conversations ended. She began to remind him casually at first, but with increasing frequency, that he was too old for her. Each time it felt like a slap he didn't see coming. He started to notice her tone when she spoke to him, less adoration, more judgment. Yet, he convinced himself it was temporary, a rough patch that would smooth out with time. The tipping point came in the most intimate part of their relationship. She began to criticize his performance in bed using words that pierced through his carefully maintained confidence. For a man who had always prided himself on his ability to love deeply and provide emotional satisfaction, her comments were devastating. "You're slow," she said one night, her words sharp as knives. "Predictable. I need more than this." She compared him to younger men, something he could never compete with no matter how hard he tried. It wasn't just his body she criticized, it was his very essence as a man. And yet, in the same breath, she would occasionally offer crumbs of approval, just enough to keep him hooked. She would tell him that no one else could love her with the dedication and care he gave. She assured him that his tenderness and attentiveness were rare gifts that younger men lacked. These fleeting reassurances, however, were laced with mockery. She would laugh at his earnest attempts to please her, calling them desperate. He couldn't see the manipulation for what it was. All he saw was a chance to prove himself, to win her over completely. He tried to endure, believing that love required patience and sacrifice. He told himself that if he could weather the storm, she would finally see his worth. But the storm only grew fiercer. Her words became weapons, cutting away at his confidence until he barely recognized himself. He started to see himself through her eyes, an aging man struggling to stay relevant, desperately clinging to the illusion of youth. He no longer felt like a man of experience and wisdom, he felt like a relic, pitted at best, mocked at worst. For anyone watching from the outside, his choice to stay might seem baffling, even pathetic. But love, especially when it turns toxic, has a way of binding its victims with invisible chains. It wasn't just her youth or beauty that kept him tethered, it was the hope she offered, the glimpses of warmth that made him believe things could be better. He was a prisoner, not just of her manipulation, but of his own need to prove his worth to someone who refused to see it. The tragedy of his story lies in its familiarity. How many of us have stayed in situations that drained us simply because we believed our love could fix what was broken? How often do we let ourselves be diminished, hoping that our sacrifice will be enough to make someone see our value? His story is a painful reminder of the dark side of love, how it can lift us to the highest heights and then drag us to the lowest depths. He wasn't just trying to win her approval, he was fighting to reclaim a piece of himself he had lost, a piece he feared might be gone forever. And that fight, more than anything, was what broke him in the end. One night, after yet another argument that left his heart heavy and his spirit bruised, he found himself retreating to the quiet sanctuary of his room. He sat in silence, the weight of the evening pressing down on his chest. Every word that had been exchanged replayed in his mind, each one cutting deeper than the last. The sting of being made to feel small, insignificant, and unworthy had become a recurring ache in his life. But tonight was different. Tonight, something shifted within him. He could no longer ignore the dull throb of unhappy happiness that had settled into the corners of his existence. He realized with startling clarity that he had reached his breaking point. Standing before the mirror, he took a long, hard look at the man staring back at him, a 70-year-old man gazing into his own tired eyes, tracing the lines on his face with his thoughts. Those wrinkles weren't signs of failure, they were markers of a life lived, of battles fought, of love given and sometimes lost. His graying hair and weathered features told the story of decades spent growing, learning, and surviving. Yet at this moment, he couldn't help but feel that somewhere along the way, he had been reduced to less than he was. Somewhere, he had allowed someone else's opinion to overshadow his sense of worth. It was in that quiet reflective moment that he came to an important realization. Self-love had to rise above all else. It wasn't arrogance or selfishness, it was survival. He couldn't continue living as though his value depended on the approval of someone who refused to see the man he truly was. He couldn't keep shrinking himself to fit into a world that didn't make space for his experiences, his wisdom, or his heart. And so, for the first time in years, he made a decision purely for himself. It was terrifying yet deeply necessary. The next evening, with a mixture of trepidation and resolve, he sat down to talk to her. He approached the conversation with a calmness he didn't know he possessed. Looking her in the eye, he explained how he felt, how the relationship had slowly eroded his confidence, how he could no longer endure being treated as if he were invisible or inadequate. He told her, in no uncertain terms, that love shouldn't come at the expense of his self-respect. No matter how much he cared for her, no matter how deeply he had hoped things would change, he couldn't continue down this path if staying meant sacrificing his dignity. He was prepared to walk away. The conversation was as painful as it was liberating. She dismissed his words, brushing them off as overreactions or dramatics, but he didn't waver. For the first time, he stood firm, grounded not in anger, but in the quiet strength of knowing his worth. It was a bittersweet moment. A part of him mourned the end of what they once had, while another part celebrated the beginning of something he had almost forgotten, self-respect. When he walked out of the house, he felt a strange mix of emotions. There was sorrow, of course. Letting go of someone he had loved wasn't easy. But there was also relief. A heavy weight that had been pressing down on him for years seemed to lift. For the first time in what felt like forever, he could breathe freely. The air felt lighter, his steps less burdened. He realized he hadn't just walked away from her, he had walked toward himself. The days that followed were a test of his resolve. Loneliness crept in, wrapping itself around him like an unwelcome visitor. Nights were especially hard. He missed the presence of someone else in the house, the sound of another voice, even the simple comfort of shared silence. But as the days turned into weeks, he began to notice something remarkable. This loneliness, while difficult, was different. It wasn't the hollow ache of being unappreciated or unloved. It was a quiet, dignified solitude that allowed him to rediscover himself. He started to reflect on his life, not with regret, but with gratitude for all he had endured and learned. He remembered the younger version of himself, full of hope and dreams, and he realized that man was still there, buried beneath years of trying to please others. Slowly, he began to reconnect with parts of himself he had long forgotten. He reached out to old friends, people who had known him before he had started losing pieces of himself in that relationship. He dusted off hobbies and passions he had set aside. He embraced solitude, not as a burden, but as an opportunity for growth and healing. In doing so, he reclaimed his sense of self, whole and authentic, without the need for anyone else's approval. And in that journey, he found true freedom. He began to rediscover his passions, the ones that had once defined him, the ones that had been overshadowed by years of seeking validation. He took long walks in the park, appreciating the beauty of nature and the simplicity of life. He picked up old books, rereading stories that had once sparked his imagination. He even started painting again, allowing colors and emotions to flow freely onto the canvas. Each small step forward was a victory. The man who once felt diminished started to see his worth through his own eyes, not through someone else's lens. The scars of the past were still there, but they no longer defined him. They were reminders of his resilience, his ability to survive, and his capacity to grow. One evening, as he sat in his quiet home, a profound sense of peace washed over him. The solitude he had feared became a source of strength. He realized that self-love wasn't about being alone, but about understanding that his worth was not dependent on anyone else's approval. The phone didn't ring as often as it used to, and the silence could feel isolating at times. Yet, he embraced it. He learned to sit with his thoughts, to find comfort in his own company, and to trust in the journey of rediscovery. And then, one day, something unexpected happened. She reached out, not to beg or to manipulate, but to understand. She wanted to apologize, to make amends. Her voice was different, gentler, less critical. She spoke of regret and self-awareness, acknowledging the pain her words had caused. For a moment, he considered it. Could they try again? Could they rebuild something meaningful? But as he reflected on their conversation, he understood that some wounds take more than mere apologies to heal. The trust that had been broken couldn't easily be mended, not without genuine effort and change from both sides. The man's choice had been made, not in defiance or anger, but in the quiet recognition that he deserved more than what he had settled for. His love wasn't desperate anymore, it was whole, authentic, and rooted in self-respect. As he stood at the threshold of his new life, he knew that the journey ahead would have its challenges. Yet, he embraced them. His story had been painful, yes, but it had taught him invaluable lessons about the importance of self-worth, the power of healing, and the beauty of starting anew, with courage, clarity, and compassion. In the days that followed, the man continued to grow. He surrounded himself with people who uplifted him, who celebrated his wisdom and experience rather than diminishing it. He embraced his age not as a limitation, but as a testament to a life rich in experiences and lessons. His heart, once guarded, began to open again, this time with discernment. He allowed love to flow freely, but only where it was genuine, where mutual respect and understanding existed. Gone were the days of chasing validation. He now sought connections that nourished his soul. Through every challenge, through every moment of solitude, he discovered a deeper sense of self. His laughter returned, spontaneous and wholehearted. His days were no longer spent trying to be someone else, they were spent in quiet contentment, learning, growing, and embracing each moment fully. And in that process, he found peace. The peace that came from knowing his worth was intrinsic, unshaken by the approval, or lack thereof, of others. He had reclaimed his dignity, his identity, and his power to choose how he wanted to live. One evening, sitting in the calm of his home, he reflected once more. The journey had been difficult, but it was one he wouldn't trade for anything. For through the pain and the struggle, he had rediscovered a sense of self-love that was unbreakable, a love rooted not in dependence, but in strength and authenticity. As he looked out the window, watching the world go by, he felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't felt in years. The sun set gently on the horizon, a new chapter unfolding before him. This wasn't just a story about an elderly man, it was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, the power of self-discovery, and the beauty of embracing life fully at any stage. He hadn't touched in years, finding joy in the simple act of creating and exploring again. One day, he stood in front of the mirror again, but this time he saw someone different. The man staring back at him was not defined by his age or his wrinkles, but by his resilience. Every line on his face told a story of triumph, of survival, of love that had been given freely and without regret. Every gray hair was a testament to the wisdom he had earned. He no longer saw himself through the eyes of others. He saw himself as he truly was, a man of value, of strength, of infinite potential. As the months passed, his world began to bloom in ways he hadn't expected. He traveled to places he had only dreamed of visiting, immersing himself in the beauty of new experiences. He found joy in the smallest things, a sunrise, a good book, the laughter of an old friend. He realized that his worth had never depended on the approval of anyone else. It had always been there, waiting for him to claim it. He learned that true love, the kind that accepts, respects, and values, starts from within. It's the love we give ourselves that sets the standard for how others should treat us. And as he moved forward, he carried this lesson with him. Life is too short to spend it proving your worth to someone who refuses to see it. Aging isn't about loss, it's about uncovering what truly matters. And what mattered most was that he had found peace, not in someone else's arms, but in his own heart. This moving anecdote serves as a profound and emotional reminder for older individuals facing doubts about love, companionship, and self-worth. The yearning for love is one of the most natural and deeply ingrained desires we experience as human beings. It transcends age and remains a part of us no matter how many years have passed. Yet, as we grow older, it becomes crucial to remember that the pursuit of love should never come at the expense of our inner serenity, self-respect, or the values we've spent a lifetime cultivating. For many, the later stages of life bring a longing to reconnect with the vitality and passion of youth. But this desire often carries risks, particularly when it leads us to compromise our dignity or invest in relationships that diminish rather than uplift us. This story is a poignant example of such a journey, where one man's experience in love became a powerful lesson, not only for him but for anyone who has ever felt torn between their emotions and their sense of self-worth. Reflecting on his experience, he came to realize that the relationship he had entered, despite its initial allure, was not a true partnership but a one-sided dynamic that tested his self-esteem. The younger partner, while charming and full of life, could not appreciate or fully understand the depth of his experiences, the wisdom he carried, or the vulnerabilities that come with aging. Instead, he found himself trying to prove his worth in ways that felt alien to him, ways that required him to step away from his authentic self. At first, the excitement of this connection blinded him to the cracks in its foundation. Like many older individuals, he was drawn to the idea of recapturing the energy and excitement of his youth. He wanted to feel needed, admired, and alive in a way that only new love can inspire. But over time, he began to see the cost of this relationship, not just in terms of the energy he poured into it, but in the quiet erosion of his sense of self. Each compromise he made, each time he ignored his inner voice, was a step further away from the person he had spent decades becoming. Ending the relationship was not an easy decision. It required immense courage and self-reflection. Yet, it was in this act of walking away that he reclaimed his identity. He realized that love, in its truest form, cannot thrive in an environment where one feels the need to constantly prove their worth. True love is rooted in mutual respect, where both partners see and honor each other for who they are, not who they wish the other person to be. By stepping away, he demonstrated to himself and others the power of self-love and the importance of prioritizing one's dignity above all else. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment below to let me know that you are still here with me. This realization was a turning point. He began to see the relationship not as a failure, but as a profound learning experience. It taught him to value himself more deeply and to set boundaries that protect his peace and well-being. He came to understand that his worth as a man was not tied to his ability to meet someone else's expectations or to relive the glory of his youth. Instead, his worth lay in his integrity, his resilience, and his commitment to living authentically, even in the face of criticism or societal pressures. For those in their later years, this story holds a powerful lesson. Every wrinkle on our face, every gray hair, is a symbol of the life we have lived and the wisdom we have gained. To sacrifice that wisdom, to deny the dignity that comes with age for the fleeting approval of another, is to lose sight of the richness of our journey. Older people, perhaps more than anyone else, understand the profound value of self-respect and the importance of living in alignment with one's principles. From this heartfelt story, I want to share 5 key lessons for older individuals navigating relationship challenges. The illusion of youth. No matter how tempting it may seem to relive the vitality of youth through a relationship with someone younger, it's essential to stay grounded in reality. Youthful energy and charm can be alluring, but they are not substitutes for genuine connection and respect. Many people, like the character in the story, find themselves giving their time and energy to someone who cannot truly appreciate the depth of who they are. This often leads to feelings of inadequacy and frustration as the desire to prove oneself becomes a trap. The danger of compromise. Love should never require us to sacrifice our core values or accept treatment that diminishes us. Yet, the fear of loneliness often drives people to tolerate situations they would have never accepted in earlier stages of life. It's crucial to remember that love is not a battlefield or a test of endurance. It should be a sanctuary of mutual respect and understanding. The importance of self-love. To be loved fully, we must first learn to love ourselves. This means embracing not just our strengths but also our vulnerabilities, our flaws, and the scars life has left behind. Self-love is the foundation of every healthy relationship, and without it, we risk losing ourselves in the pursuit of another's approval. The power of integrity. A person's worth is not defined by their age or their ability to conform to societal expectations, but by their integrity and resilience in the face of adversity. This integrity is what transforms the challenges we face into symbols of strength and wisdom. The gift of reflection. Every relationship, no matter how difficult, is an opportunity to learn and grow. By reflecting on our experiences, we can gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and what we truly need to thrive. For this man, the relationship became a mirror that revealed both his vulnerabilities and his strength. This story is a testament to the courage it takes to prioritize oneself, even when it means walking away from something familiar. It reminds us that true happiness is not found in the validation of others, but in the quiet confidence that comes from living in alignment with our values. For anyone in their later years struggling with relationship challenges, let this be a beacon of hope, a reminder that it's never too late to choose dignity, self-respect, and authenticity over fleeting illusions.